You are in my seat, boy. Get up." The command didn't just hang in the stagnant air of the first-class cabin. It sliced through the silence like a jagged blade. Jacob didn't look up from his tablet immediately, but the muscles in his jaw locked tight. He knew that tone. It was the distinct, curdled sound of entitlement colliding with prejudice. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm, but she wasn't coming to de-escalate. She was coming to enforce a hierarchy that had nothing to do with ticket numbers. In exactly 5 minutes, a decision would be made that would destroy 3 careers, shatter a national airline's reputation, and turn a routine flight into a corporate execution. The man they were removing from seat 1A wasn't just a passenger. He was the reason they all still had jobs, at least for the next hour. The rain battered against the reinforced glass of the departure lounge at O'Hare International Airport, creating a grey, weeping backdrop to the morning rush. Inside the terminal, the air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee and the frenetic energy of delayed travelers. But inside the exclusive lounge of Horizon Airways, the atmosphere was a hermetically sealed bubble of calm. Jacob King sat in a high-backed leather wing chair, sipping sparkling water. At 34, Jacob possessed a stillness that often unsettled people. He didn't fidget. He didn't check his phone every 3 seconds. He simply observed. Dressed in a charcoal cashmere hoodie, fitted dark denim, and pristine white sneakers, he looked like a successful creative director or perhaps a music producer. Few would guess that he was the architect behind Kingston Dynamics, a logistics and software empire that had quietly cornered the market on global shipping solutions. Even fewer knew that 12 hours ago, Kingston Dynamics had finalized a hostile takeover of Horizon Airways. The ink on the digital contracts was barely dry. The press release was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Today, Jacob was flying to New York, not as the new owner, but as a ghost, a mystery shopper in seat 1A, evaluating the service of his newest and most troubled asset. "Boarding for Flight 402 to JFK is now beginning for first-class passengers," the announcer's voice chimed, smooth as silk. Jacob picked up his black leather duffel bag. He enjoyed these moments of anonymity. They were the only times he got the truth. When people knew who he was, the smiles were too wide, the champagne too cold, the apologies too profuse. But when he was just a black man in a hoodie, the world showed him its teeth. He boarded the plane first, offering a polite nod to the flight attendant, greeting passengers at the door. She was a tall woman, with blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun, her name tag reading Lana, Senior Purser. She barely glanced at him, her eyes flicking past his shoulder to see if anyone more important was behind him. "Boarding pass," Lana said, her hand extended, palm up, fingers twitching with impatience. Jacob pulled up the QR code on his phone. She scanned it without a word, the machine beeping a confirmation. 1A, she muttered, pointing to the left. She didn't offer to take his coat. She didn't offer a pre-flight beverage. She just turned her back to greet the next passenger with a beaming, "Welcome aboard, sir. So good to see you." Jacob didn't mind the cold shoulder. In fact, he was counting on it. He settled into the wide, plush leather seat of 1A, the prime spot in the cabin. He stowed his bag, took out his tablet, and began reviewing the airline's quarterly loss reports. The numbers were bleeding red. Horizon Airways was rotting from the inside out. Bad management, poor service, and a culture of arrogance. He was here to cut the rot out. The cabin began to fill. The air grew warmer. Jacob kept his head down, engrossed in a spreadsheet detailing executive bonuses that were alarmingly high for a failing company. Then he heard it. The heavy, confident footsteps of a man who believed the ground should be grateful he walked on it. "Honey, I told you I handled it," The agent was a bit stiff, but they know who I am, a booming voice echoed from the galley. Jacob glanced up through his lashes. Entering the cabin was a man who looked like a caricature of corporate excess. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars, but fit him poorly, straining at the gut. His face was flushed, likely from the airport bar, and his silver hair was slicked back with too much product. This was Gregory Pike. Jacob recognized him instantly, not from personal acquaintance, but from the business tabloids. Pike was a real estate developer, known for renovictions and lawsuits. Trailing behind him was a younger woman, Beatrice, clutching a designer handbag like a shield. She looked exhausted, her eyes darting around nervously. Gregory Pike marched down the aisle, scanning the row numbers. He stopped abruptly at row 1. He looked at his ticket. He looked at the seat number above Jacob's head. Then he looked at Jacob. The smile on Gregory's face didn't vanish. It curdled into a sneer. He didn't check his ticket again. He didn't look confused. He looked offended. "Excuse me," Gregory said, his voice loud enough to turn heads in row 4. Jacob tapped the screen of his tablet, saving his notes, and looked up calmly. "Yes?" "You're in my seat," Gregory stated, pointing a thick finger at the headrest. "1A. I always sit in 1A. Jacob kept his expression neutral. "I believe you're mistaken. I'm booked in 1A. "Booked?" Gregory let out a short, sharp laugh. He turned to his wife. "He says he's booked." He turned back to Jacob, leaning in, invading his personal space. The smell of scotch and expensive cologne was overpowering. "Listen, pal. I don't know how you snuck up here, or if the system glitched and gave you an upgrade you didn't pay for, but I paid full fare, $5,000. So pack up your little iPad and move back to where you belong." Jacob didn't blink. "I have a ticket. I suggest you check yours again." Gregory's face turned a shade of crimson. He wasn't used to being told no, certainly not by someone who looked like Jacob. He snapped his fingers in the air, a sharp crack-crack sound. "Attendant! Attendant!" Gregory bellowed. "We have a situation here." Lana, the senior purser, appeared almost instantly. She had been charming a pair of businessmen in row 3, but dropped the smile the moment she saw the commotion. She hurried toward row 1, her face composing itself into a mask of professional concern. But the concern was directed entirely at Gregory Pike. "Is there a problem, Mr. Pike?" Lana asked, her voice dripping with honey. She clearly recognized him, or at least recognized the type of customer he was, loud, rich, and litigious. "You're damn right there's a problem," Gregory spat, gesturing wildly at Jacob. "I boarded this plane to find this individual squatting in my seat. I have 1A. My wife is in 1B. We travel together, always." Lana turned to Jacob. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic stare. She didn't ask him what happened. She didn't ask for his side of the story. She made an assumption. "Sir," Lana said, her tone clipped, "I need to see your boarding pass immediately." Jacob unlocked his phone and held it up. The screen clearly displayed the digital pass. Jacob King, Flight 402, Seat 1A, First Class. Lana stared at the screen. She frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She looked at Gregory. "Mr. Pike, may I see your boarding pass?" Gregory huffed, digging a crumpled paper pass from his jacket pocket. He shoved it at her. "Here, read it and weep." Lana took it. It also read 1A. It was a double booking, a rare, catastrophic error in the airline's legacy reservation system, one of the many technical failures Jacob had noted in his due diligence report. 2 valid tickets for the same seat. In these situations, airline protocol was clear. The passenger already seated, provided they had a valid boarding pass, had the right to the seat. The second passenger was to be accommodated elsewhere or compensated heavily. But Lana didn't care about protocol. She looked at the two men. In seat 1A sat Jacob, young, black, dressed in casual streetwear, reading a tablet. Standing in the aisle was Gregory Pike, older, white, wearing a suit, a known Platinum member, creating a loud scene. The calculation in Lana's mind was visible. She assumed Jacob was an upgrade, a mistake, or an employee on a pass. She assumed Gregory was the real customer. She handed Gregory his ticket back with a reassuring nod. "I apologize for the confusion, Mr. Pike. The system must have made an error." She turned to Jacob. She didn't lean in to whisper discreetly. She stood tall, ensuring the surrounding passengers could hear her authority. "Sir, there has been a mistake with the ticketing system. This seat belongs to Mr. Pike. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things and follow me." Jacob remained seated. "I'm afraid I can't do that. I was here first. I have a valid ticket. The error is on the airline's end, which means you need to find another solution for this gentleman." Gregory scoffed. "Solution? The solution is you getting your ass up." Lana stiffened. "Sir, please do not make this difficult. Mr. Pike is a Platinum Elite member. Priority seating guarantees are part of his status. If there is a conflict, priority goes to the status member." "I purchased this ticket 2 weeks ago," Jacob said calmly. "Full fare. I am not moving." "We don't have time for a debate," Lana snapped, her patience eroding. "We have a flight slot to hit. If you do not vacate this seat voluntarily, I will have to classify you as a disruptive passenger." "Do you know what that means?" "It means I call the captain, we bring the Port Authority on board, and you leave in handcuffs. Is that what you want?" Beatrice, standing behind Gregory, looked mortified. She tugged on her husband's sleeve. "Greg, maybe we can just sit in row 2. It's fine." "It is not fine, B," Gregory roared, slapping her hand away. "It's the principle. I'm not letting some hoodlum take what I paid for." The word hung in the air. Hoodlum. Jacob's eyes narrowed. He looked at Lana. He waited for her to correct Gregory, to admonish him for the slur, to enforce the airline's zero-tolerance policy on abuse. Lana said nothing to Gregory. Instead, she glared at Jacob. "Last chance, sir. Move to economy. We have a middle seat open in row 34. I'll issue you a voucher for the price difference. Take it, or get off the plane." Jacob looked at the empty economy seat offer. From first class 1A to middle seat 34E. It was an insult designed to break him. "I'd like to speak to the captain," Jacob said. "The captain is busy prepping for departure," Lana lied. "I am the lead crew member in this cabin. My word is final. Now move." She reached out and actually grabbed the strap of Jacob's bag, tugging it. "I said, move." That was the line. She had touched his property. Jacob placed his hand over hers on the bag, his grip firm but not violent. He removed her hand. "Do not touch my things." Lana recoiled as if she'd been burned. She straightened up, her face pale with rage. She pressed the intercom button on the wall. "Captain, we have a level 2 security threat in first class. Passenger refusing crew instructions and becoming physically aggressive, requesting removal assistance." She looked down at Jacob with a triumphant, sneering smile. "You wanted the hard way? You got it." Jacob didn't yell. He didn't plead. He simply pulled out his phone. He didn't dial customer service. He didn't dial a lawyer. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a number saved simply as H. Walker, CEO, former, correction. He scrolled past that to the new number he had acquired yesterday. T. Miller, VP of Operations, Horizon Airways. He hit dial. The cabin air grew heavy, suffocating. Jacob held the phone to his ear, but before the call could connect, Lana snatched the device from his hand. "No phones!" she shrieked, her professional mask completely shattered. You are not making calls to your friends to come and start a riot. Hand it over." She tossed his phone onto the empty seat across the aisle, seat 1B, where Gregory's wife, Beatrice, was trying to make herself invisible. The phone landed face down on the leather. Jacob looked at his empty hand, then up at Lana. His voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." "I don't think so," Lana scoffed, crossing her arms. "I'm protecting my passengers." From the cockpit, the heavy door unlatched. Captain Robert Sullivan emerged. He was a man in his late 50s with the weary, exasperated look of a pilot who just wanted to get in the air and go home. He didn't look at the manifest. He didn't look at the tickets. He looked at Lana, his trusted lead flight attendant for 10 years. "What is going on back here, Lana?" Sullivan demanded, adjusting his cap. "He's refusing to deplane, Captain," Lana said, pointing an accusing finger at Jacob. "He's aggressive. He grabbed my arm. He's threatening Mr. Pike here." Sullivan turned to Jacob. He saw a young black man in a hoodie. He didn't see the CEO. He didn't see a paying customer. He saw a delay. "Son," Sullivan said, his tone patronizingly paternal, "we don't tolerate violence on Horizon Airways. Grab your bag and get off my plane, now." "I didn't touch her," Jacob said, his voice steady. "And I have a valid ticket. This man is trying to steal my seat because he thinks he owns the place. Check the system logs, Captain. Check who booked the seat first." "I don't have time to play IT support," Sullivan snapped. "Lana says you're a threat. That's enough for me. If you don't walk off, we drag you off." At that moment, 2 officers from the airport police squeezed through the boarding door. They were large, imposing men with hands resting on their utility belts. The lead officer, Officer Grady, scanned the scene and locked on to Jacob immediately. "This the guy?" Grady asked. "That's him," Gregory Pike piped up, stepping forward and puffing out his chest. "He's been harassing my wife and refusing to follow crew orders. I want him arrested." Grady nodded at Gregory, a silent acknowledgement between 2 men who believed they were the authority in the room. He marched up to seat 1A. "Sir, stand up. Turn around. Hands behind your back." "I have done nothing wrong," Jacob said, raising his hands slowly to show he was unarmed. "I am the victim of a double booking error and racial profiling." "I said stand up." Grady didn't wait. He reached forward, grabbing Jacob by the shoulder of his cashmere hoodie and yanking him forward. The physical force was unnecessary and jarring. Jacob stumbled out of the seat, barely keeping his footing. Before he could straighten up, Grady spun him around and slammed him face first against the bulkhead wall. "Stop resisting!" Grady shouted for the benefit of the onlookers, though Jacob hadn't resisted at all. Snap! The cold steel of handcuffs locked around Jacob's wrists. A gasp went through the cabin. A few passengers in economy were craning their necks, phones held high, recording the incident. "That's right! Take out the trash!" Gregory cheered, clapping his hands. He looked at the passengers behind him. "Safety first, folks. Can't be too careful these days." Lana picked up Jacob's duffel bag and threw it toward the door. It hit the floor with a thud. Then she picked up his phone from seat 1B. She held it for a second, looking at the screen which was lighting up with a call back, and then smirked. She handed it to the second officer. "Evidence?" she whispered. Jacob was marched down the aisle. The walk of shame. He caught the eyes of the other passengers. Some looked sympathetic but terrified. Others looked away, unwilling to get involved. But as he passed row 1, he looked Gregory Pike in the eye. Gregory was already settling into seat 1A. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and made a show of wiping down the armrests where Jacob's arms had been, as if cleaning away a disease. "Finally," Gregory sighed, stretching his legs out. "Lana, bring me a double scotch. No ice. I need to wash the stress away." "Right away, Mr. Pike," Lana beamed. "And thank you for your patience." Officer Grady shoved Jacob forward. "Keep moving." Jacob was pushed out onto the jet bridge. The cool, damp air of the tunnel hit his face. The noise of the plane faded behind him, replaced by the echo of his own footsteps and the heavy breathing of the officers. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. But as they dragged him up the ramp toward the terminal, Jacob's phone, clutched in the second officer's hand, began to ring again. And again. And again. The gate area was chaotic. Passengers for the next flight were already lining up, and the sight of a man in handcuffs being led out of the jet bridge caused a ripple of whispers. Officer Grady pushed Jacob toward a row of plastic chairs near the podium. "Sit. We're waiting for the transport van to take you to the station. You're looking at charges for trespassing, disturbing the peace, and assaulting a flight crew member." Jacob sat, his posture straight, despite the cuffs behind his back. "Officer, I need you to answer my phone." "Quiet," Grady muttered, typing up notes on his own device. "The phone ringing in your partner's hand," Jacob said, his voice cutting through the noise. "It is T. Miller, the Vice President of Operations for Horizon Airways. If you do not answer that, you will be explaining to the police commissioner why you ignored a direct order from the owner of the airline." Grady paused. He looked at his partner. The phone was indeed ringing. The caller ID displayed T. Miller, VP Ops, urgent. Grady frowned. He looked at Jacob. The hoodlum in the hoodie. Then he looked at the phone. Doubt, cold and slithery, began to creep into his gut. "Answer it," Jacob commanded. "Put it on speaker." The second officer looked at Grady. Grady nodded slowly. The officer tapped the green button and hit speaker. "Jacob! Jacob, are you there?" The voice on the other end was frantic. It was a woman's voice, sharp and terrified. "We just got the alert from the internal monitoring system. The flight crew marked you as a security threat. What the hell is going on? I'm looking at the live feed from the gate. Are those handcuffs?" The color drained from Officer Grady's face. He leaned toward the phone. "Ma'am, this is Officer Grady, airport security. We have a suspect in custody who—" "Suspect?" T. Miller screamed. The audio distortion made the passengers at the gate jump. "That is not a suspect. That is Mr. Jacob King. He owns the airline. He bought the controlling stake 14 hours ago. If he is in handcuffs, I swear to God, I will have your badge and your pension before lunch." The silence that followed was absolute. The gate agent, Paul, who had been watching from his computer, suddenly gasped. A red banner had flashed across his screen. System override. Command level Alpha. "Officer," Paul stammered, his voice trembling. "My screen. It just locked me out. It says, CEO protocol initiated." Grady looked at Jacob, really looked at him. He saw the quality of the hoodie now, the calmness, the utter lack of fear. "Uncuff him," Grady whispered to his partner. "Now," T. Miller shouted from the phone, "and put Jacob on." The second officer fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. The metal clicked, and Jacob's hands were free. He rubbed his wrists, his expression unreadable. He took the phone. "I'm here, Teresa," Jacob said calmly. "Mr. King, I am so sorry," Teresa Miller stammered. "I'm at the HQ. I'm grounding the plane. I'm sending a team." "No," Jacob said. "Do not ground the plane. I don't want to punish the other passengers. They have places to be." "Then what do you want to do?" Jacob looked at the jet bridge door. Through the window, he could see the plane pushing back slightly from the gate. The engines were spooling up. Lana and Captain Sullivan were trying to leave. They thought they had escaped. "Bring the plane back to the gate," Jacob said. "Do not let it take off. Tell the tower to revoke their clearance immediately. Done, Teresa said. And Teresa? Yes, sir. I want the HR director and the chief legal officer to meet me at this gate in 20 minutes. Bring the termination papers, all of them. Understood, sir. Jacob hung up. He handed the phone to Officer Grady, who looked like he might vomit. Officer Grady, Jacob said softly. You have a choice. You can continue to treat me like a criminal and explain to your superiors why you assaulted the owner of the premises you patrol. Or you can escort me back onto that plane and assist me in correcting a mistake. Grady swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't know. Ignorance is not an excuse for bias, Jacob said. But you can start making up for it now. Walk with me. Out on the tarmac, the engines of Flight 402 whined down. The pushback tug stopped. Inside the cockpit, Captain Sullivan stared at the radio in disbelief. Tower, repeat that, Sullivan said. Flight 402, clearance revoked. Return to gate immediately. Corporate order. Code Black. Code Black? Sullivan went pale. Code Black was an emergency grounded order reserved for bomb threats or total corporate shutdown. What is going on? Lana asked, stepping into the cockpit with a glass of champagne in her hand. Why are we stopping? Sullivan turned to her, his eyes wide with fear. We have to go back. Management just pulled the plug. Inside the first-class cabin, Gregory Pike frowned as the plane lurched and began to be towed back toward the building. Hey, Gregory shouted. What's happening? I have a meeting in Manhattan at 2. The plane reconnected to the jet bridge with a heavy thud. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The cabin door opened. But it wasn't a mechanic who walked in. It was Jacob King. He stood in the doorway, rubbing his wrists. Behind him stood the 2 police officers, heads bowed in deference. And behind them, running down the jet bridge, came a team of 4 people in suits, carrying briefcases and tablets. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Jacob stepped onto the plane. He didn't look at Lana, who had dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, shards of crystal scattering everywhere. He walked straight to seat 1A. Gregory Pike looked up, his mouth open. You? How the hell did you get back on? Officer, I told you to arrest him. Jacob didn't answer. He turned to the group of executives who had just boarded, breathless and sweating. Ladies and gentlemen, Jacob said, his voice projecting clearly through the silent cabin. Introduce yourselves. A woman in a sharp navy suit stepped forward. I am Sarah Jenkins, Head of Human Resources for Horizon Airways. Jacob nodded. He pointed a finger at Lana. Sarah, please inform this former employee of her status. Lana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Former? Jacob then pointed at the cockpit door, which was open, Captain Sullivan staring out. And him. He turned slowly to Gregory Pike. And as for you, Jacob said, a small, cold smile finally touching his lips. You paid $5,000 for this seat? I'm afraid I'm going to have to refund you, because this plane is no longer taking you anywhere. The silence inside the cabin of Flight 402 was heavy, a physical weight pressing down on every lung. The recycled air seemed to have stopped circulating. All eyes were pinned to the front of the plane, where the hierarchy of the world had just been violently inverted. Sarah Jenkins, the head of Human Resources, stepped forward. She was a woman of steel and terrifying efficiency, clutching a red folder that looked like a death warrant. She didn't look at the passengers. She looked exclusively at Lana. Lana Mercer, Sarah began, her voice projecting with the cold clarity of a judge reading a verdict. Employee ID number 49202. Effective immediately. Your contract with Horizon Airways is terminated for cause. Lana staggered back, her hand trembling as she reached out to steady herself on the bulkhead. The color had drained from her face so completely that her makeup looked like a mask painted on a corpse. Terminated? But Sarah, please. You can't do this. I was following protocol. I was prioritizing a platinum member. I didn't know he was... I didn't know. You didn't know he was the owner? Jacob interrupted, his voice calm but laced with venom. Tell me, Lana, if I had been a white man in a suit, would you have needed to know I was the owner to treat me with basic human dignity? Would you have dragged a white man out of his seat for Mr. Pike? Lana opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The truth was too obvious to deny and too damning to admit. You violated Article 4, Section 2 of the Employee Code of Conduct regarding discrimination and harassment, Sarah continued, flipping a page in the red folder. You also violated Federal Aviation Regulation 121.5 regarding the interference with a crew member's duties, ironically, by weaponizing your own authority to falsify a security threat. You lied to the captain, you lied to the police, and you assaulted a passenger. I touched his bag, Lana screamed, tears finally spilling over, cutting tracks through her foundation. I just touched his bag. You initiated physical contact to intimidate, Jacob corrected. And then you stood by and smiled while the policeman handled me. You enjoyed it, Lana. That's the unforgivable part. You enjoyed the power trip. Sarah extended her hand. Your badge, your airport security clearance card, and your company-issued tablet. Now. Lana looked around the cabin, begging for an ally. She looked at the businessman in row 3. She looked at the elderly couple in row 2. They all looked away. The passengers who had been annoyed by the delay were now filming the scene with grim fascination. With shaking fingers, Lana unpinned the silver wings from her uniform, wings she had worn for 15 years. She unclipped her ID. She handed them over to Sarah. You are to retrieve your personal belongings from the crew lockers under police escort, Sarah said. You are banned from flying Horizon Airways for life. You will find your final paycheck deposited this evening, minus the cost of the damages to the company's reputation, which our legal team is currently calculating. Lana let out a sob, a broken, ugly sound, and rushed past Jacob, running off the plane and into the terminal, her heels clicking a chaotic retreat. Jacob didn't watch her go. He turned his attention to the cockpit. Captain Sullivan was still standing in the doorway, his face a mixture of shock and defensive anger. He was a senior pilot, a man who believed his 4 stripes made him untouchable. Now, look here, Mr. King, Sullivan started, his voice booming. You can't just fire a captain like that. I have a union. I have rights. I relied on the information given to me by my purser. I followed the chain of command. The chain of command ends with me, Jacob said, stepping closer. And a captain's first duty is the safety and fair treatment of everyone on board. You didn't investigate. You didn't ask me a single question. You saw a black man in a hoodie, and you saw a problem to be disposed of. I was maintaining schedule integrity, Sullivan barked. I don't have time to conduct a court case for every seat dispute. You made time to threaten me, Jacob countered. But here is the part you missed, Captain. I wasn't just sitting in 1A reading a tablet. I was monitoring the flight logs. Jacob signaled to one of the IT specialists who had boarded with the team. The young man hooked a laptop up to the cockpit's data port. Show him, Jacob commanded. The specialist tapped a few keys. Captain Sullivan, the log shows that at 8:42 a.m. you received a digital notification from the gate agent that there was a duplicate check-in for seat 1A. The system flagged it as a software conflict. The standard procedure is to block the seat and resolve it at the gate. Instead, you manually overrode the block. You authorized the gate agent to board Mr. Pike despite the conflict. Sullivan went pale. You knew, Jacob said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a shout. You saw Gregory Pike's name. You're buddies, aren't you? Maybe golf partners? You saw his name blocked, and you cleared it, creating this mess. You knowingly put 2 passengers in one seat because you wanted your friend to be comfortable. Sullivan stammered. Greg, Mr. Pike. He's a good customer. I was just doing a favor. You used a federal aircraft as a personal favor service, Jacob said. That is gross negligence and corruption. Sarah Jenkins stepped up to the captain. Captain Robert Sullivan, you are relieved of command. You are suspended pending a formal investigation by the FAA, which we have already triggered. Please vacate the cockpit immediately. Sullivan looked at his controls, the panels, the throttle quadrant, the seat he had spent his life earning. Then he looked at Jacob. He saw no mercy in the younger man's eyes. Slowly, Sullivan took off his cap. He placed it on the dashboard. He grabbed his flight bag and squeezed past Jacob, head down, a broken man walking into a retirement of disgrace. The cockpit was empty. The purser was gone. Jacob turned around to face the cabin. He smoothed the front of his hoodie. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the passengers, I apologize for this disruption. I am replacing the entire flight crew immediately. A fresh crew is already on their way from the standby lounge and will be here in 10 minutes. To compensate you for this delay and this unpleasantness, every passenger on this plane, economy and first class, will receive a full refund of their ticket price and a $2,000 travel voucher. A collective gasp went through the plane. Then, applause broke out. Someone in row 12 shouted, "Thank you!" But Jacob wasn't done. The applause died down as he turned his gaze to seat 1A. Gregory Pike was still sitting there. He hadn't moved. He was clutching his double scotch, though the ice had melted. His face was a mask of stubborn, arrogant denial. He clearly thought that if he just sat still enough, the storm would pass him by. He was a rich man, and rich men didn't face consequences. Jacob walked over and stood right next to the seat. He rested his hand on the headrest, looming over Gregory. "Mr. Pike," Jacob said pleasantly, "you seem to be having trouble hearing. I said this flight is no longer taking you anywhere." Gregory Pike took a long, slow sip of his drink. He set the glass down on the cocktail table with a deliberate clink. He adjusted his expensive silk tie. Finally, he looked up at Jacob with a sneer that twisted his features into something ugly. "You think you scare me, kid," Gregory said, his voice slurring slightly. "So, you bought an airline. Congratulations. Your new money. I've been running this city since you were in diapers. I know senators. I know judges. You treat me like this, and I'll bury you in lawsuits so deep you'll need a submarine to find your way out." Jacob laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Lawsuits, that's your move. You should really check who you're threatening, Gregory." Jacob snapped his fingers. The legal aide from his team handed him a tablet. "Gregory Pike," Jacob read from the screen. "CEO of Pike Developments. Your company specializes in commercial retrofitting. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Pike Developments is currently the primary contractor for the new terminal expansion here at O'Hare. A contract worth $40 million. Gregory's eyes narrowed. "That's public record. So what?" "What isn't public record," Jacob continued, scrolling down, "is that Horizon Airways, under the previous management, signed an exclusivity deal with your firm to renovate our private lounges in 12 airports across the country. A deal signed 3 months ago." Gregory shifted in his seat. "A contract is a contract. You can't break it." "I can," Jacob said. "Because of the moral turpitude clause. It's standard in all corporate vendor agreements. It allows us to nullify a contract immediately if the principal of the vendor company engages in public conduct that brings disrepute to our brand." Jacob gestured to the passengers behind them, many of whom were still holding up their phones, live streaming the entire confrontation. "You are currently viral, Gregory," Jacob said. "I just checked Twitter. The hashtag #NorWorkRacistOnHorizon is trending #1 in the country. There is video of you calling me a hoodlum. There is video of you cheering when the police handcuffed me. You have brought massive disrepute to my brand." Gregory's face turned a sickly shade of grey. "You wouldn't." "I just did," Jacob said coldly. "My legal team filed the cancellation notice 2 minutes ago. You just lost the lounge contract. That's $12 million gone." "You son of a—" Gregory started to rise, his fists clenching. "Sit down," Jacob barked. The command cracked like a whip, and Gregory fell back into the seat, stunned. "I'm not finished," Jacob said. "I also happen to sit on the board of the Metro Airport Authority. We have a meeting next Tuesday. I intend to show them the video of how you treat passengers and staff at their airport. I imagine they will have some concerns about keeping Pike developments on the terminal expansion project. I predict you're going to lose the airport contract too. That's another $40 million. Beads of sweat began to pop out on Gregory's forehead. His empire was built on leverage and debt. Losing $50 million in contracts in one day wasn't just a bad day. It was bankruptcy. "You're bluffing," Gregory whispered, his voice trembling. "You can't destroy my business over a seat." "I'm not destroying it over a seat." Jacob leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "I'm destroying it because you thought your money gave you the right to treat people like trash. I'm destroying it because you looked at me and decided I was nothing. Well, Gregory, today you learned that nothing costs a hell of a lot." Gregory looked at his wife, Beatrice, in seat 1B. She was staring at Jacob, her eyes wide. She wasn't looking at him with fear. She was looking at him with awe. "B," Gregory snapped. "Call the lawyer. Get on the phone. Do something." Beatrice hesitated. She looked at her husband, a man who had bullied her, silenced her, and embarrassed her for 20 years. Then she looked at Jacob, a stranger who had just dismantled her husband's ego in 5 minutes. "No," Beatrice said softly. Gregory froze. "What did you say?" "I said no," Beatrice said, her voice gaining strength. She reached down and picked up her designer handbag. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "I'm not calling the lawyer, Greg. I'm not fixing this for you. Not this time." "Sit down, Beatrice!" Gregory roared, raising his hand as if to strike her, a reflex born of years of control. Officer Grady, who had been watching from the galley, stepped forward instantly, his hand on his taser. "Sir, hands where I can see them." Gregory froze, realizing he had almost assaulted his wife in front of police officers and a cabin full of witnesses. Beatrice stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked at Jacob. "Mr. King, I apologize for my husband's behavior. It was despicable." "You have nothing to apologize for, Mom," Jacob said gently. "You are not responsible for his sins." "I am if I stay," Beatrice said, a tear rolling down her cheek. She turned to Gregory. "I'm done, Greg. I'm taking a cab to my sister's. Don't come looking for me." "B, you can't leave me. Not now," Gregory pleaded, his bluster completely gone, replaced by the pathetic panic of a bully who has lost his victim. Beatrice didn't answer. She walked up the aisle, head held high, ignoring Gregory's shouts. The passengers in the cabin actually parted to let her through, some of the women nodding at her in silent solidarity. Jacob watched her go, then turned back to Gregory. The man was broken. His business was crumbling. His wife had left him, and he was being live-streamed to the world as a pariah. "Now," Jacob said, "get off my plane." I can't," Gregory stammered. "My bags. My meeting. "Officer Grady," Jacob called out. The officer stepped forward, eager to redeem himself. "Yes, Mr. King?" "Mr. Pike is refusing to deplane. He is also intoxicated and has attempted to assault a passenger, his wife. I believe that constitutes a breach of peace." Grady nodded grimly. He pulled out his handcuffs, the same handcuffs that had been on Jacob's wrists 20 minutes ago. "Gregory Pike," Officer Grady said, grabbing Gregory's arm and hauling him out of the plush leather seat of 1A. "You are under arrest." Gregory struggled, but he was weak, defeated by the weight of his own karma. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," Grady said, spinning him around and clicking the cuffs tight. "You're the guy who just lost everything." As Gregory was frog-marched down the aisle, the passengers didn't just watch. They stood up. They booed. "Na-na-na-na, hey, 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 goodbye." Chant started from the back of the plane and swept forward. Gregory Pike, the titan of real estate, was dragged off the plane, weeping openly. Jacob stood in the empty space of row 1. The seat 1A was empty. The energy in the cabin had shifted from tension to a chaotic, euphoric release. Teresa Miller, the VP of Ops, walked onto the plane, looking breathless. She approached Jacob. "Mr. King," she said, checking her watch. "The new crew is here. We can be ready to push back in 15 minutes. But seat 1A is empty. Do you want to take it?" Jacob looked at the seat. It was the best seat on the plane. It was what this entire war had been fought over. He shook his head. "No," Jacob said. "I don't want it." He looked down the aisle. In row 34, in the very back of economy, sat a young woman with a baby. She looked exhausted, bouncing the crying infant on her knee, surrounded by cramped bags. Jacob pointed to her. "Go get her. Give her seat 1A. And seat 1B. Give her the whole row so the baby can sleep." Teresa smiled. "Yes, sir. And where will you sit?" Jacob picked up his duffel bag. He walked down the aisle, past the cheering passengers, past the business class, all the way to the back. He stopped at row 34. He looked at the middle seat, 34E, the seat Lana had tried to force him into. "I'll sit right here," Jacob said, tossing his bag into the overhead bin. "It gives me a better view of how my airline is really running." He sat down in the cramped economy seat, pulling his hoodie tight. But the story wasn't quite over. As the plane taxied out, Jacob's phone buzzed. It was a notification from his bank. And then another. And another. But it wasn't money going out, it was the stock market. News of the incident had leaked. The video of the undercover CEO defending a passenger and firing the corrupt crew had hit the news cycle. Horizon Airways, HZN, stock price, uppy 12% in after-hours trading. The world was watching, and they liked what they saw. 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 402, but the ripples of that morning were still turning into tidal waves across the corporate landscape. The video of Gregory Pike's arrest and Jacob King's calm dismantling of a corrupt system had been viewed over 50 million times. It wasn't just a viral moment. It became a case study in business schools and a warning shot to entitled elites everywhere. In the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Horizon Airways, the atmosphere had shifted from stagnation to electric innovation. Jacob sat at the head of the table, not as a ghost, but as the most visible CEO in the industry. The company's stock had tripled. They were no longer the airline of delays and rude service. They were the People's Airline. Sarah Jenkins, the HR director who had stood by him that day, tapped the screen to show the quarterly report. "Employee morale is at an all-time high, Jacob. The new zero-tolerance policy for discrimination is working. We've replaced 40% of the old management guard with merit-based hires. Customer satisfaction scores are up 90%. Jacob nodded, looking out the window at the tarmac below. "And the King Protocol?" "Fully implemented," Sarah said. Every seat dispute is now handled by a mandatory 3-step verification process involving a ground supervisor. No more bypassing the system for friends of the pilot. But while Horizon Airways soared, those who had tried to drag it down were crashing hard. The downfall of Gregory Pike was absolute and public. The moral turpitude clause Jacob had invoked triggered a domino effect. Once Horizon Airways cancelled their contract, the airport authority followed suit 3 days later. Without those 2 flagship projects, Pike Developments defaulted on its massive loans. The bank seized Gregory's assets to cover the debt. His yacht, the Titan, was auctioned off for pennies on the dollar. His mansion in the Hamptons was foreclosed. But the hardest blow came from the courtroom, not the bank. In a downtown courthouse, formerly known as a place Gregory Pike could manipulate with a phone call, he sat alone. His high-powered legal team had resigned after his checks started bouncing. He was represented by a court-appointed public defender. The judge, a stern woman who had seen the viral video, looked down at him over her glasses. "Mr. Pike, in the matter of your divorce proceedings, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Beatrice Pike. Given the evidence of emotional abuse and your financial mismanagement, which dissipated the marital assets, the court awards Mrs. Pike 60% of the remaining liquid capital and full ownership of the city apartment." Gregory slumped in his chair, his face gaunt, his hair grey and thinning. He looked at the other table. Beatrice was there, looking radiant. She wore a simple dress, but she carried herself with a dignity that money couldn't buy. She didn't even look at him. She signed the papers, stood up, and walked out a free woman. She had used her settlement to start a foundation for victims of domestic emotional abuse. As for Lana Mercer, the karma was colder. She had applied to 4 other airlines. All of them had flagged her file. The aviation industry was small, and word travelled fast. No one wanted the flight attendant who had gone viral for racism. The last Jacob heard, she was working the night shift at a toll booth on the turnpike, watching cars fly by while she remained stuck in a box of her own making. Captain Sullivan took early retirement, but his pension was slashed due to the gross misconduct finding in his file. He spent his days on a public golf course, complaining to anyone who would listen about how he was a victim of woke culture, but even his old friends had stopped returning his calls. Back in the boardroom, Jacob stood up. The meeting was over. "One last thing," Sarah said, smiling. "We have a VIP passenger flying out of Gate 4 today. She requested to meet you." Jacob walked down to the terminal. He didn't need security. He walked among the passengers, shaking hands, taking selfies. He reached Gate 4. Sitting in the waiting area was the young mother from economy, the one he had given his first-class seat to 6 months ago. Her baby was sleeping soundly in a stroller. "Mr. King," she said, standing up, her eyes wide. "I can't believe you came." "I wanted to see how you were doing," Jacob said warmly. "I'm doing great," she said. "That flight, it changed everything. The vouchers you gave us, I used them to fly my mother here to help with the baby so I could finish my nursing degree. I graduate next week." Jacob smiled. This was the real victory. Not the stock price. Not the destruction of Gregory Pike. It was this. "Congratulations," Jacob said. "When you graduate, send me your resume. We need good nurses for our corporate medical team." He turned and looked out at the runway. A Horizon Airways jet was taking off, climbing steep and fast into the blue sky. The logo on the tail seemed to shine brighter than before. Karma hadn't just hit back, it had cleaned house. And for the first time in a long time, the view from the top was clear. Jacob King proved that true power doesn't need to shout. While Gregory Pike lost his fortune, his reputation, and his wife due to his arrogance, Jacob used his influence to uplift those who had been overlooked. The story serves as a brutal reminder that in the age of information, character is your most valuable currency. You never know who you are talking to. The person you try to crush today might be the one holding the keys to your future tomorrow. And that is the story of how one moment of arrogance took down an entire empire. It's crazy to think that if Gregory had just been polite, he'd still have his business, his wife, and his dignity. It really proves that being kind costs nothing, but being hateful can cost you everything. I want to know what you guys think. If you were Jacob, would you have given up your first-class seat to that mother in the end? Or would you have taken the win and sat in luxury? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new drama every week. Thanks for watching, stay humble, and I'll see you in the next video.